Again, from a technical point of view, there's no great trick here to lighting this. I lit this the way it would be lit by sunlight. All I did was put some big lights outside the windows, which would be on the right side of your screen. That is it. There's no other lights on this set. Now, granted, I may have adjusted the curtains a little bit or moved a piece of furniture so that I could get a piece of dapple on somebody's cheek, like Scott Wilson here in the foreground, relative to somebody else, or adjusted the light so that it would hit Dan Aykroyd in a certain way. But I really wanted to keep the lighting as what they call source lighting, so that you knew where the source of the light was coming from. In this case, it's coming from the windows on the camera right side, and that's it. That way, from a cinematography point of view, you can't really get lost in terms of, well, where should the light go? And as you can see, the light's hitting the guy on the left side of his face, and the right side is falling into shadow. Camera left side of his face. The scene that John Voight was in was shot in this movie in 3 days. Between the address to Congress and everything in this office and the scenes that are still yet to come, we were on stage in 2 days, and then we spent 1 day out at the Claremont colleges doing the Rose Garden scene and the scene that you saw where one of his cabinet members runs up and says, Pearl Harbor's been attacked. So very quickly. It's not like we spent a week doing this. Done before lunch.
Very early calls because
Yes.
he's wearing
a lot of makeup, many hours worth of makeup.
prosthetic makeup.
And the nice thing is actors like John appreciated that, which was once he was up to speed and rolling and really revved up, we could get this scene shot and get it done while he was still fresh and still had the intensity. And as a cinematographer, that's part of what you consider when you're trying to shoot a movie. I mean, you obviously can say, God, I'd love to spend an hour now when we turn around to clean up these close-ups, but you have to figure out at what cost. What am I giving up to do that? Am I going to lose performance or not? And with a guy like this who's been there since 4 o'clock in the morning with all this makeup, you want to give him every chance he can get to just hit the ball out of the park. Production designer would give me he'll make out of cardboard a scale model of the set, and I'll sit down with the heads of the grip department and the electric department and say, okay, I need little light bulbs here, I need this here, I need that here, I need these lights outside the windows, so that when we show up at 7 o'clock in the morning, what I really have to do is just turn everything on and then sort of balance it. I don't have to drag the stuff off the truck and put it in place. So it allows us to move very quickly. We do what they refer to as we pre-rig all these locations, so that by the time the shooting company gets there and Michael's got everybody dressed and the makeup department has everybody made up, we're ready to start filming. Many things going on in every shot. You have to do that, or the costs will just skyrocket out of control.
Period of the women's clothes, just because women did not dress to the moment like they do today, especially in a place like Hawaii, and especially with women who are on a budget like naval nurses would be. And late 30s costumes had a sweetness to them and an innocence, and that kind of helped the point that Michael was going for, and that is that Pearl Harbor marked the end of innocence in this country. Later 1940s clothes, or even mid-1940s clothes, were a lot more arch and sophisticated. These had soft, like puff sleeve shoulders, and there was a femininity that disappeared later on in the 40s.
Decorator, and she did a beautiful job. She, her feeling for period and detail is just fantastic. She's just got such a great sensibility, and I was really lucky to have had her.
Top secret car. Small. If you remember the opening shot, there's a ceiling fan turning. I had to turn it myself by hand, and that I could then move it around the camera, because if it just spun, it would crash into the camera, which was in the corner of the room. You don't get a sense of it so much. I mean, you get a sense that it's a small room, but This one was insanely small. Again, this would have been something that I lobbied to build as a set, but didn't win that battle.
I mean, she goes right down to every single detail and everything. She'd done Angela's Ashes, and so she's really good at period films. And she came in with a whole crew of people who were marvelous, and just went through on every single set and just had there's just those little things that really brings a set to life. You know, there's the basics, the chairs and the tables, but then her little smalls that she used to put around the room were just great and of the period. So she's fantastic, and what a big help. The art direction, art department and the set decorating department obviously all work together to try and create the look. We'll create a set, build a set, and then she then comes in and dresses it to perfection, which is great. Research for that time. I mean, because Pearl Harbor was such a big historical thing that there's books that have been written, there's photographs that were obviously taken during the time, there's little movies that have been made. So we literally put our hands out and grabbed everything we could get. The people in the Arizona Memorial, actually, over in Fort Island, were very, very helpful. They were great. We called them up and wanted to find out a few bits and pieces about what had happened and what they knew. They sent us some drawings, sent us some books, and they were very, very helpful. And having people like that on your side is great, because they just keep sending you all this wonderful stuff. And we were trying to get it as realistic as possible. I know that Michael was, and Nigel were, you know, especially trying to make it as real and not too hokey. So therefore you need as much reference as possible to make sure that what you're doing is right. To take a little bit of license because something won't work. You know, if there's an action that doesn't quite work with what was happening in reality, you have to sort of change it for the whole motion of the film. So it's not like we're shooting in a museum, but we're trying to get the flavour of it being as right as possible. But there's a few licenses here and there. I'm sure there'll be a few letters, but we meant to do it right, honest. At the pre-production period, we were able to sit down with Michael Bay and go through quite a few scenes and say, okay, what are you looking for here? What are you looking for there? He's fantastic. He's so full of energy, and he's always there. You know, he's always coming up with different ideas and having foreground pieces so that he can shoot past them and shoot into the set and things like that. He's amazing, and his wide angles. He uses lots of wide angles and things like that. So it's great because you see all the set. You know, there's so many times you'll build a set, you'll go to all the trouble of spending all the weeks and months preparing something, and then you'll have someone come in and then just shoot a face or shoot a corner, and you never even see the set. Whereas he actually sits back and uses a wide angle lens, and you see the set. So it's like, great, fantastic for us, because you actually, you know, you can show what you've been doing for the last sort of year.
Consequences where necessity is the mother of invention. We shot this part of the scene in the morning, and then we cleared everything out so we could put all the coffins in there for the scene that you saw with all the bodies. And then at the very end of the day, we went and shot the end of the scene, which you'll see in a second. And fortunate to have a silver airplane, because the sun is essentially set at this point. And I just took a light and banged it against the side of the airplane. I mean, you can see here now it's essentially nighttime. And it even, you know, if I could do it all over again, I'd reshoot the scene, because the amount of ambience behind Danny just keeps dropping and getting bluer and bluer. It's one of those things that I see, maybe nobody else does, but bit a little bit by the amount of daylight you have and the amount of work you're trying to get done in a day. It's much whiter here than it was in the coverage. World War I blimp hangars at the Tustin Air Base in Tustin, California. So the largest wood-structured building in the world. They're over a quarter of a mile long. They're extraordinary.
Here.
Yeah, I love there's a whole change here, you know. We've sort of gotten off of Hawaii. We've cleaned them up. I also like Alec. I thought he was really good in this movie. And he was working. The guys had a different sort of tenor about them.
As in Gladiator, it wasn't my job to research Roman music. All I was concerned about was, you know, what do these people feel in their hearts? You know, I mean, I think that's what I want to write about. And as we are now talking in English, and my first language is German, and I'm using this slippery metaphor of words, I think I can be much clearer and far more precise about emotions in the language I'm comfortable in, which is music. And international, and you don't have to dub it. And it's, you see, I think it has great advantages. I'm not trying to write a rock and roll score, if that's what you mean. No, because that would be too far on the other side. But, you know, there is a sort of a thing whereby you don't acknowledge the times in a sort of heavy-handed way.
The we wet the ground down just to create a sense of more production, reflecting what we had there to make it feel like there were more airplanes there and more guys there than there were.
The mission I'm asking you to...
I had no idea of. I mean, the whole Doolittle Raid aspect of it, is brilliant, because even, American friends that I have, they talk to most Americans, they've never heard of the Doolittle Raid. So that's, I think that's a brilliant, ending for the film, because it's, it's a true event in history that hasn't been documented, so... or it has been documented, 30 Seconds Over Tokyo and stuff like that. But it's not. It really isn't. People aren't aware of it, so it's great to have that because mine's there.
Like the scene in Armageddon when they got the armadillo into shape.
He's crazy.
Airplanes were just absolutely gorgeous. It was really a treat to to work around them every day. You had to be careful, obviously, because they had the potential to be dangerous, but. They were just beautiful.
Dyeing the uniform fabrics, I kind of pushed them a little bit just to make the khakis a little more khaki, and I think in conjunction with the way the film stock John used, it has that kind of 1940s Technicolor feeling about it.
Yeah, well, they feel richer. They don't feel washed out, which is nice. It was lit. I mean, that's like a wool jumpsuit. These guys, they're all wearing bomber jackets. It is so hot. It can't. I mean, it's Africa hot here. It is beyond. It is miserably hot.
He's gonna sneak us about
It was a small movie squad had done in England called The World Apart, which really got me Rain Man. So it was not only Barry Levinson, Diane Levinson that heard that score. It was Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson as well, and. They really wanted me to do Days of Thunder, and I remember that Linda, Jerry's wife, was a huge Driving Miss Daisy fan, and I think poor Jerry had to go and see Driving Miss Daisy about 20 times or something like that. Nonetheless, he still gave me the job on Days of Thunder, and I don't know, Days of Thunder was warfare. It was a battle. It was impossible. It was so, sometimes it's so hard to make things work. That was one of them. We just did by the skin of our teeth. It was brutal, and to stay friends beyond that is, those sort of relationships ultimately last. I'll tell you a very sort of personal thing. I mean, I had this sort of clangor of an anxiety attack in the middle of that movie, and somebody must have told Jerry something. And, Hans is basically freaking out, and Jerry just came into my studio where I was writing, and he just sat down in a corner. Just didn't say, he didn't insult me by really acknowledging that I was sort of spinning, but he just stayed there and made sure it was all right. And and I went, okay, well, if that's what it takes to be a good producer, he is a good producer,
believing it the most.
And this was actually I think this was the first scene we actually ever filmed in the movie.
It was.
This was day -3. This was 3 days before the studio thought we were going to start. And it was kind of a hair and makeup test, and we'll shoot a scene at the same time kind of deal.
I'm sorry.
And I can honestly tell you, when we shot this scene, I said to Michael, God, I don't know. I don't know if I'm convinced with Kate. I didn't know. I honestly thought to myself, I don't know if she's the right one or not. Did we make the right decision? And God knows we obviously did. But I can remember actually being a little insecure at that point. And boy, did I make a mistake. When I read the scene, I always thought she should have been tougher, but I think she played it perfectly.
Most nurses would have gone on to...
So there's this, something that started as a very, very serious, discussion about which way I was going to turn, because I need to explore these things, and I do drive people crazy with it. And this discussion turned pretty much into an argument, and Jerry just hung in there with me because he knew I needed to go and be aggressive about it and figure out these answers and ask him and be obnoxious and all these things, and he, look, if I had been in the producer, I would have had fired me at a certain point, and he didn't, because he cared enough. And that's what I admire about him. He cares enough not to fire the guy who is being obnoxious, because he knows it's part of the process.
You know how I know?
The actual mission briefing room on the Lexington that they had preserved as a museum. And what I did was I just went in and put bigger bulbs in the light fixtures and essentially shot it practical. I might have added one or two little lights to pick up little highlights and things on the background, but all those little overhead scoop lights, they had 25-watt bulbs, and I think I put 100-watt bulbs in, and then we went down there and shot, and it was the real mission ready room.
Called several times before on commercials, so you know, it was. I'm used to his process of working. Every director you work with has a different method, and Michael has his way, and it's great. He likes to do a lot of research. He likes to, be bombarded with a lot of references and visual imagery beforehand. So we had a lot of sets on this film, and so it was a case of sort of flooding it with research initially, and then whilst you're doing the research, you're also out looking for locations that could correspond to them. And then at a certain point, you then determine how close you want to stick to the reference, and when it's going to be much more interesting to veer off and design something that's going to be much more dramatic to the point of that scene in the story.
Got them because they weren't in the final version of the movie.
How lucky you two are.
We built little light bulbs that you would buy for your house, and we put magnets on them because these ships are all steel. So the easiest way for me to rig lights was, if I needed a light that was just off camera to the left of Alec Baldwin's face as you look at the screen, I could literally just, with a magnet, stick it to the side of the wall and plug it in. And it allowed us, because these compartments were so cramped, you didn't want to have to rig stands because there were girders on the ground, and it gave us a really quick, unique way of being able to light, because everything in there was metal and a magnet would stick to it. On the USS Texas, which is a ship, it's a floating museum in Houston, Texas, and we had the pleasure of shooting there in August as well. 110 degrees. Were done by our aerial unit. When the Pacific Fleet was coming back to Pearl Harbor, we went out and got permission from the Navy to bring a helicopter out there and film very close to these ships. And then what ILM did is they replaced the pieces on those aircraft carriers that were modern, like the new communications transmitters and the new radar systems, because essentially the ships are of the proper vintage. It was just that they've now been updated with a lot more of electronic warfare. So ILM just went and erased all that electronic warfare off of these ships, but it gave us the ability to fly past the real thing. Below the flight deck, you can't tell that it's full of F-A-18, strike aircraft on it.
Locations on this movie, 2 locations in Texas. We were shooting in Mexico, we were shooting in Hawaii, we were shooting in England and Los Angeles, and I always had to have a number of crews going at the same time, like one wrapping up where we had been, one taking care of where we're shooting presently, and then one prepping the next location where we were headed. And just the amount of manpower in this film was amazing.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. Just if your job was just trying to figure out what the right look for the costume was, or what kind of lighting you wanted to do, it would be easy. There was so much work on this movie which was about logistics and moving resources. Both, for me, for Michael, for Andy Ryan, the gaffer, for Les Samita, the key grip, for Chuck Stewart, the prop master, and a lot of the things that Michael had and that the art department had, they were one of a kind. It wasn't like you could ship some of this stuff way ahead of time to another place, because you couldn't replace it. There just weren't multiples of some of these things. Certainly the airplanes, if we needed 3 or 4 or 5 B-25s in Texas and we were shooting the day before in California, we could all get there, but you couldn't get those airplanes there that quickly. It was a very complicated movie logistically, probably very not too dissimilar to what it would be like to mount a war.
To mount a period war.
To mount a period war, yeah.
We also didn't have enough prep time, but it was, in making all these uniforms, it was, ordering all the buttons we needed, getting them in time, getting to the buttons and the zippers to the uniform makers, and having them be the right type. We didn't know what we'd be seeing either.
Spoken about, who was the second unit cameraman, was in the nose of that plane when it took off, giving you the point of view. He said it was definitely an e-ticket ride. Watched two of them one day and two of them the next day, and the ones that went off the first day had a lot more wind across the flight deck, and I believe it'd be this one. They got off a lot quicker. The ones that took off on the second day were the ones that sort of went off the end of the deck and dropped a little bit before they started climbing back up again. Had to do in this movie. Think about in 2 days, emotionally, the amount of different gears he sort of had to shift. We would finish in one room and send him to Michael to be changed into a new wardrobe, and suddenly he had to, change his whole demeanor. It was, quite extraordinary what he could do in a very limited amount of time. Indiana. It's in Gary, Indiana. That's where this was filmed. Monitoring room, and it was built inside of a power plant in Pasadena, California. Had so much electricity running around it, we actually had to have them de-energize part of the plant because we were worried about getting electrocuted, which wasn't enough to do. Pre-war, large WPA project kind of feel to it. There are miniatures that are being blown up at ILM.
Of the war and how Michael has portrayed it, I think is going to get a lot of people interested in it. Like I say, the history lesson with the Doolittle raid in itself is that's a great story. And when I first read the script, I thought it was like a far-fetched ending, and then sort of, it's real. It's like, so I was amazed. So I think that's a really good lesson to be told.
I remember back to when I first read the script, I felt as though part of the movie was well enough developed that we should finish. The movie is about Pearl Harbor and that it should end in Hawaii. Obviously, the script would have needed to be changed a bit, but I still sort of feel that way. I still feel like this is a movie in and of itself about the Doolittle Raiders, and that we race through it fairly quickly, and it almost feels like we're trying to head to the end of the movie. I know that Michael and Jerry and everybody disagreed with me, and obviously the proof is certainly in the movie has performed extremely well, being the #1 picture of the year. But I was sort of being critical of the script from a storytelling standpoint, that were we trying to tell too many movies here? Could it have just been about these characters and how the invasion of Pearl Harbor affected their lives? Credibility, because these guys are suddenly becoming like superheroes, having done everything. I was in the minority.
One of the reasons I wanted to, I'm recording some of the stuff for the battle on Monday, which is actually way ahead of schedule, because I want to try it out. Put it in, see if it works. I want to have the luxury of being able to fail at this a couple of times, because you have to really hone it down and to make sure, if you're out there and you're trying this experiment, you better get it right, because this is whatever anybody says, and I'm supposed to be experienced in all this, you still feel the weight of that budget on your shoulders, trust me. And if you're working with friends, and Jerry has been a friend for a very long time, you do not want to let him down. And there are two ways of letting him down. One is to do the conventional and not be courageous about it, and the other one is to be so courageous that I'll just do something so crazy it doesn't work. So it's finding that right thing. We have meetings constantly, and daily we discuss things and talk, and hey, what do you think of this, and do you think this is better? These are ongoing conversations all the time. We all make this film.
Plan, it's supposed to be dusk, and dusk is a very tricky time of day to shoot, because usually when you're doing a dusk scene, you have more than 1 or 2 shots to do it. In this sequence, it was like 6 pages long, so we didn't have the luxury of being able to go out to the Disney Ranch for 3 weeks, so that for an hour each night we could capture, in the same lighting conditions, the next shot that we needed for the sequence. So for me, the challenge here was to create this feeling of dusk becoming night in real time, let's say in over the 10 or 15 minutes that the scene plays out in a way that you believe. I mean, there are times when some shots are brighter than others, but overall, I think you buy the vibe. Tired of smoke by the time this movie was over. I was ready to do a season of Red Shoes Diaries. I was just tired of guns and guys and dirt.
And for instance, the themes in this movie are so simple, and in a year's time I will go, what's the big deal? Why was I sitting there till 3 or 4 in the morning, getting rid of notes, trying to make it simpler, and then throwing out these ideas again, throwing out one after the other, It's obvious. It's obvious that this is the right thing. It's so simple, but it's the process, the time it takes to get simple. Whoa, and right now I feel as I had an hour and a half sleep last night. We just get to the orchestra session. Everything is like this, and it's self-imposed, of course. I mean, yes, I could do this whole thing quicker and more efficiently and just sort of do it, and whatever, but it's not in my nature. My nature is, I have to sort of torture myself, and unfortunately, by default, everybody around me, And they are right, it is. So, the last thing Michael needs is, the last thing he needs is an epic score to go with huge epic images, So I can be small, I can be really specific, I can be, romantic. And that's the great thing, I can play tragedy with one note and one instrument, as opposed to, I have a pretty big orchestra sitting there, but just now, the cue I was rehearsing just before lunch, I literally halved the size of the orchestra because it felt better to be a little more intimate, to have somebody whisper in your ear as opposed to shout at you. Do you know what I mean? So the experiment or the ambition right now is to see how personal can I get, how because he's got these epic shots. So wouldn't it be nice to find a really simple and soft and romantic core to all these shots? I tried giving some of the pieces to other people to just see what would happen when they arranged it, and it was really interesting that all the time I had spent making things simple went out of the window as soon as somebody else went to it. So I had to go and at least map out everything and the tone of it, find the core of this. What I wanted it to be is I wanted it to be broad as opposed to loud. I wanted it to be big in a sort of expansive, widescreen way without ever getting loud. I don't really know. I do most of it. Look, I'm the guy. I'm the Hollywood composer who had 2 weeks of piano lessons and just hears things in his head. So that's how I work. I just fumble around until it sounds the way I hear it in my head. And I'm just the idiot savant at this. Seriously, I mean that's how I work. It's just until it sounds like the picture.
We did pad Kate's stomach because at this point she would have been, I think we figured maybe 5 or 6 or even 7 months pregnant.
It was funny because when we started the movie, her daughter was like a year old. And she was Michael and Jerry had put her through the boot camp of working out and getting so fit. When we first met her, she was sort of coming off of the, just having had a baby and worked very hard to get very fit. And all of a sudden now we wanted her to look pregnant again.
We look back.
For women.
America.
She dove the real Arizona. They got permission from the U.S. Navy to go and dive it while we were there in Pearl Harbor.
Cast so well.
Yeah. We got very lucky. It was the end of a day, and we had this kind of magic, 20 minutes of light that you just can't. I don't care how much equipment you have, you can't create. You can't create this. And when it happens naturally, you don't have to do anything. You just try to get out of the way and turn the camera on. And this is just all natural, available light. Film to romanticize things and, just kind of give them a dreamy quality. we were certainly doing things we were not being subtle, we were making a big kind of epic American movie. But I think, Michael does an amazing, I was quoted somewhere saying that Michael could create a traffic jam with one car, and it's true. He's got a great eye, and he really knows how to put elements together to give you the sense that you're there, and it's a skill that not a lot of directors have, especially on this scale. I mean, this is about as big a movie as you make since Ben-Hur. I mean, this was a bigger movie than Titanic in terms of what we had to do. And Michael is amazing at all those elements into a bowl and coming out with something really, that's good. And certainly for me, there's you could name on one hand the directors that allow you to paint that large a canvas. Well, the responsibility is that this movie, we're in a business and it has to make money, so there's a part of it that has to appeal to a wide audience. A movie about Pearl Harbor that hasn't been developed, certainly there is, but not one I think that would allow you to create the spectacle that we created and still be able to, cover its costs. Most of us, 95% of the crew had been with Michael since The Rock. So, it gave us a great advantage. Kenny Bates, our stunt coordinator, did a really superb job. But he did. This was an incredibly well-skilled crew that had the advantage of having worked together before for Michael.
Yeah, we were hardened to the abuse.
Well, and we also knew what we could expect of each other. You know what I mean? And also knew that, everybody, we were all in it together. It was like you might be getting your ass chewed out today, but it was going to be the other guy's turn in the barrel tomorrow. Nobody escaped getting their turn in the barrel. More than most people, because I was in much closer proximity to Michael all the time, but nobody was immune.
Your credit sequence in this?
I don't know. It's long, that's for sure. I can't find that hard to believe because, all these digital artists have, whatever their union is, has given them a great position, because I had electricians working on this movie for 80 days that didn't get a credit, and then there's a guy who does removes one hotel from the background of one shot, at ILM, and he gets a credit. It seems like a bit of an injustice. I'm sure there are people in the wardrobe department that were not mentioned, but you could be the assistant comp 2D animation matte prep guy, and you get mentioned. For watching the director's cut of the DVD of Pearl Harbor. We've been enlightening, or at least giving you some anecdotes, or at least a look behind the curtain where the glorious Oz operates from.
Yeah, thanks for watching.
Thank you for hearing the commentary for the director's cut of Pearl Harbor movie. And don't forget to subscribe and tell me comments below. Goodbye.